attention to the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center towers in New York City on September 11th, 2001, and a whole lot more. This is 9/11 Freefall. Hi everyone, this is Andy Steele, and I'm back again for yet another episode of the program that examines and highlights the scientific evidence that we were lied to about what really destroyed the Twin Towers and World Trade Center 7 on 9/11, and reiterates again and again the truth, that explosives were what really brought them down. Alright, this program brings on guests who are doing something with this evidence and who are shoving the truth into the light, doing the work that our government unofficials and the media are not doing for us. This program right here, 9/11 Freefall, comes to the mic every week like a lighthouse in the murky waters of lies and propaganda to guide those who are lost back to safe ground. Alright? Only the truth are going to set us free, folks, and the most important truth of them all right now is that the buildings in New York were taken out with all of those lives inside them in a pre-planned, controlled demolition. All because 9/11 itself was a controlled event, harvesting so far a decade of war, lost civil liberties, and a neurotic society tearing itself apart, living in this prison called the post-9/11 world. Now, if this is the first time you're hearing the show, as I said, we talk about 9/11 science, 9/11 activism, and we present you with the opportunities for you to do what you can to awaken your fellow man. Fight back against this system that shields mass murders from justice, and tell your grandkids that during this battle for America's soul, you were on the front lines on the side of good. Alright, we shine a spotlight on groups at the forefront of this battle, in particular architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth is a non-profit organization led by Richard Gage, AIA, since 2007, presenting the evidence of the Twin Towers and World Trade Center 7's controlled demolition and chopping the legs out from under the official story like Paul Bunyan clearing away a forest of dead, rotting wood. Alright, so if you go to ae911truth.org, you'll see there's a petition of over 1,700 verified architects and engineers calling for a real investigation into what destroyed the Twin Towers and Building 7, along with thousands of other supporters as well, including myself. Folks, if you're listening to this program right now, you need to go there and get your name on one of those lists. Alright, no matter what you do for a living. Alright, if you have common sense and a fully functioning brain and know that random fire doesn't just bring down a 47-story steel-framed high-rise, then welcome aboard. Alright, at ae911truth.org, there's a number of different volunteer opportunities available to you. Alright, you have a talent. You have something to bring to this fight. You know that saying, have a gun will travel? Well, in this case, have info will travel. And if you go to that site and read its evidence page, you'll have all the info you need to take it to the street and throw rocks at the clay feet on which the post-9/11 world stands. Well, this is it, folks. You know, usually I start off these programs with 9/11 related news, and this news certainly will qualify. And you're going to see now that the screws are tightening and the big iron fist is clenching its fingers. Alright, Facebook is taking one of the first major shots at those in the alternative news movement, including 9/11 activists like Richard Gage and William Rodriguez. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, earlier this week, a number of prominent alternative news people and activists had their Facebook pages shut down or suspended. Alright, some sites are claiming this is about the Second Amendment battle that's taking place right now, but it's bigger than that, folks. Alright, it's bigger than that because, again, Richard Gage, who doesn't publicly opine on issues like the Second Amendment or things like that, was targeted too. Alright, now, there's a number of articles about this. The one I happen to grab right now was off of InfoWars, but there's other prominent names include Kurt Nimmo, he's a blogger, Aaron Dykes, Amber Lyon, Brandon Robb, if you remember, he was that Marine who was thrown in a mental institution because he had posted pro-liberty, pro-9/11 truth materials on his Facebook page. We talked about him many months ago on this show. Michael Rivero, Anthony Hilder, William Lewis, Richard Gage, like I said, William Rodriguez, 9/11 hero there, someone named Infowar Artist. I mean, there's a number of people. You know, you can check out the list on the internet. Now, Richard Gage's Facebook was reinstated after people complained, but accounts that have been suspended can still be seen, but posting rights have been revoked. And this is right from the Paul Joseph Watson article, that most of these accounts have not simply been temporarily suspended, they've been shut down completely. Now, a lot of us, for years, have been standing eyeball to eyeball with this system, and now a part of that system, which, you know, have no doubt, Facebook is a part of the system, has blinked. Obviously, it's troubling that this kind of open censorship of alternative news is taking place, but this should also serve as an example of just how afraid this system is of people like us, all right? People like you. People out there talking about the real issues of the day outside of the controlled sound stages of the flickery blue box in your living room. All right, you know, they put out this idea, and I'm sure activists in this audience have heard it before, but the idea is this, that even though things are screwed up right now, you can't do nothing about it, so you should just give up and quit. All right, that you have absolutely no power, that you're just some ant lost in the sand of some hill, and that the minute you step out of line, the big boot's going to come down and crush you right where you stand. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you know, look upon what's happening now. All right? Look at how desperate a few regular people have made that big boot. I mean, yeah, Facebook shut them down and they'll have to start new pages, but who cares about that, okay? They'll rebuild. They'll live. Okay? But I mean, look at this. Facebook and the system it represents has showed itself now for the cowards that they really are, that they collectively are. All right? They've proven that they are scared of Richard Gage. Okay? Again, if AE 9/11 Truth were just a group of, a rogue group of oddballs inventing conspiracies on the net, there would be no response to them whatsoever. Okay? They would be relegated to some dark corner of the internet along with the 2012 apocalypse people. Oh, a Happy New Year, by the way. No. Richard Gage needs to be censored because he is telling the truth. All right, let me say it again. Richard Gage is being censored. He needs to be censored according to the opposition, to the other side, to the establishment. Richard Gage needs to be censored because he's telling the truth. All right, because he is bringing real facts to the debate, because he does have the credentials and others with credentials beside him to bring power to what he is saying. Okay? Because AE 9/11 Truth's latest documentary, Explosive Evidence Experts Speak Out, was #1 on PBS. People see that. You know, to steal a line from a famous poem, Ozymandias, look upon my works, ye mighty, and tremble. Well, in this case, folks, ye mighty are looking upon the works of AE 9/11 Truth and the 9/11 community as a whole, and all those in the alternative news world, and they are trembling right out of their snakeskin boots. They are afraid. I have no doubt. They are afraid. And what they're doing now, this is what I feel in my gut, they're testing the waters to see what they can get away with, because the mass peer pressure, the appeal to controlled authority, the outright lying to the American public is just not working anymore. All right, what they got here is a tiger by the tail, and they are losing their grip of that tiger, and they're afraid of getting devoured. Now that doesn't mean that we should underestimate what we're fighting here. But look at this, folks. But look at it. Look at the desperation. All right? If the actual people, and not the Muslim boogeymen we were told were responsible for 9/11, but the actual people who pulled off and covered up 9/11 were embodied into one person, I'm sure if you looked into that person's eyes right now, they'd be all wide, and you would see the fear in them. And what I say to you out there is to not back down. All right? Don't back down. Fight these people hard. All right? Move in for a knockout punch. The bad guys here are beginning to taste their own blood in their mouths in this massive 11-year fight we've been in. So don't let up. Enjoy this. Taunt them. Dog them. Make them wish they were never born, and use your Facebook to do it. And I guess this brings us to the question of the week. All right, this is the question of the week. What should be the response to Facebook's massive censorship of truth activists? Now, each of them are going to have their own responses, of course, but what should be the audience's response? What should be the general public's response? What should be our individual responses to this act of desperation from Facebook, who is happy for people to share their information as long as it's about what they're eating at the moment or what movie they're going to that night. But when you're actually using it to spread real news, well, that is a big no-no in their world. They don't want people talking about Building 7. They don't want people talking about the nanothermite found in the dust. So what should be the response to Facebook's massive censorship of truth activists? What do you think? All right, got any ideas? Now, I do. I always have ideas. My brain's always spinning. All right, we talk about boxing a lot on this show, and we use it as an analogy a lot. And a lot of times at big fights, I see people in the audience with signs, and the signs simply say things like that the fighter they're rooting for's opponent fears him. All right, like an example, Tyson fears Douglas, or Jones fears Smith. It's just a simple taunt. Well, the same should apply here in this big fight that we are all not even just spectators in, but a part of. All right, so what I say the response should be, this is my suggestion, throw it on the chalkboard, is put it in your Facebook avatar. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, just a picture of you holding up a sign saying Facebook fears Richard Gage. Proudly hold it up, smile, show how proud you are. All right, what's the worst that could happen if you do that? What, they delete your profile? Ooh, big deal. You can make a new one and add all your people. Again, Facebook is not some legal entity. It's not going to ruin your life if you get some profile deleted. Okay, but do that. You make a picture. You just scribble on a notebook with a marker. Facebook fears Richard Gage, because it is the truth. It's not a lie. It's not slander. They are afraid. That's why they're suspending his account. That's why they're not letting him post anything. Because they don't want it. They can't control it. It's not on the sound stage. It's not coming out of the liar box in your living room. So you'll be telling the truth when you do that. Facebook fears Richard Gage. I'm going to do it. You're going to see my smiling face. Now, I don't have a Facebook in my actual name. It's in another web page that I run's name, but it's going to be up there, and my face will be there, and it will say, Facebook fears Richard Gage. You need to do that, too. All right, why is this important to do it? It's just Facebook, right? Well, because again, and I feel in my gut that this is just a test. And if you don't stand up to obvious censorship of the truth like this, then you're only going to embolden the cowards to strike again and on a bigger scale. We can't let that happen. The stakes are too high, folks. So if you got your own ideas, I want to hear them. If you think that you got an idea that just puts mine to shame, that towers over it, and is really good, then call us with your own response, your own ideas. And the phone number again is 315-982-6663. That's 315-WTC-6663. Or you can write them in to us at freefall911truth@gmail.com. That's our temporary email address for now. It's going to be freefall911truth@gmail.com. Okay, what we're going to do right now is what we do every week. We're going to take about 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 and their families, and all the people who have died as a result of the post-9/11 world in the wars that follow. So we're going to take those 10 seconds right now. And that's 10 seconds. And we always remind you at this time, folks, that we do this 10 seconds of silence simply to keep ourselves focused on what's really important and why we do this show. Again, we come in, we do this every week, and we bring on all these guests, and all these guests are motivated by the same thing. It's to bring justice to the souls that were lost that day, to the families that still mourn, and the family members that know the truth, the people out there speaking and doing their part. And again, as I've said on this show before, the ghosts of that terrible day won't be at rest until they have justice, and you are a part of getting that justice for them. Okay, now my guest today is Philip Jarman. He's a guy like us, all of us, doing what he can to get the word out about 9/11, and he's a volunteer with AE 9/11 Truth. And I brought him on today to rap with me about a number of important issues related to 9/11 Truth that I think should be addressed. And I like hearing his take on things, and I know you will too. Philip is a Canadian, and he graduated from the University of Guelph and studied Canadian history. I hope I pronounced that right. I'm sure he'll correct me if I didn't. He spent his career in aviation, first in the Canadian military, and then did commercial helicopter work on the west coast of Canada. Now, he has 13,500 hours, and he is still in aviation in that he's been working on modifications to the Mosquito helicopter over there in Costa Rica where he lives now. He's done a lot, from running Christian school to doing business in Latin America. Philip, welcome to 9/11 Freefall.
Thanks very much for the invitation, Andy.
Now, what we always ask our guests, because we like to know where people come from and what brought them into this fight, is, tell us your origin story. How did you wake up to 9/11, and what brought you into to doing something about it?
Well, my origins probably date back farther in the system than the actual events of 2001. We were cognizant of all the details that surrounded the Oklahoma City disaster, and we'd also, in history, I had found my understanding of Canadian history totally revised during my more mature years. What I'd been taught in school was just not working out, and I actually took some issues with the Canadian government tax system in order to demonstrate that, and I really appreciated that exercise. So false flags and that kind of thing were known to me, and this was such high drama on the morning of that it was painfully obvious that from my aviation background that there was no Air Force available, and it's only 5 minutes away to Andrews Air Force Base, and a line of fighters. The most protected airspace around the United States, of course, is around the Capitol. And, of course, the drama unfolded at such length that where was the Air Force? And I thought to myself, from what I know of my own experience in aviation, things are not adding up. I cannot take the media's conclusions on this. There has to be a much deeper thought pattern. And this is obviously televised to the world, so it's obviously got some planning involved. There's some things happening here behind the scenes, so we won't take the media's drama and story for word. We will take the time to investigate it. So that's how it got started.
Now, it's been 11 years since the event, and there's been a number of researchers and different activists compiling evidence, compiling all of their work together. Now, right now, at this time in history, 11 years later, what in your opinion is the strongest evidence that we were lied to?
Well, it has to be the evidence that's been turned up by architects and engineers for 9/11 truth. This is a discipline that you have, that we have at our fingertips. There's so much knowledge that's been available. And to actually apply the science of building buildings and the science of taking buildings down became very, very clear when Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth was founded, that there was that this was moving out of the field of conjecture into something quite objective, scientific, something that could be demonstrated. And Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth was staying on that track. They weren't letting themselves get involved in conjecture and speculation. So the evidence became harder and harder, and it was a whole new field. I mean, we've watched explosive demolitions on television throughout our lifetime, but the fact is to have it right in our face, right understanding the parallels between Building 7 and the North and South Towers, and to see them photographed and demonstrated right in front of your eye. It's irrefutable. It's something that just galvanizes a person into saying, we've got to do something to stand up and say, I'm not going to accept a false explanation. There has to be something more, and this crime has to be laid at someone's door other than 19 hijackers with box cutters.
Absolutely, and what you're saying, it's obviously sincere, and it's what a lot of people say, even people who don't want to believe it. And, I listen to activists talk a lot of times, and they'll say words like sheeple, and they'll go on these long diatribes about, how the public is asleep, or they'll call their fellow man stupid and things like that. And I don't really think that's the case. I think that there's something in certain people. People can see the evidence, but then there's different layers of it. There's people who just choose to ignore the evidence because they don't want to deal with it. They don't want to think about it. There's people who look at the evidence, say, yeah, there's, obviously that Building 7 was a controlled demolition, but what can you do? And then there's people who say, I can't live with this. I can't live with this lie. I'm going to do something about it. So it's not even a question of, and I say this to the audience out there, it's not a question of intelligence or anything like that. It's a question of just, which people are going to stand up, which people are going to sit down. And you're one of the people up, Philip. Now, tell us, in your history, with this issue with 9/11 Truth, you said right on the day you were taking up issues or had saw something wrong with the Air Force response to 9/11, and then you were convinced even more by the AE 9/11 Truths evidence. What made you start doing something, and what were your first steps towards 9/11 Truth activism?
Well, I was an activist by about 9:15 on the same day because having been a military pilot, I just know how air traffic control and how the military works in that flight area. I've flown in that area, and I know just how serious they are about defending that airspace. And to have everybody incapacitated and nobody responding to 4 jetliners loose without the right transponder codes, etc., and of course then the evidence of crashes into buildings, that's untenable. You can't have that happen with such a highly trained force that sits in standby, ready to defend the nation. So just on that basis, I was a pariah with my family immediately because 9:15, I said this has got to be an inside job for the Air Force to be incapacitated or sent off in other directions or commanded to stay still. Someone is taking the control that should be in every pilot's mind, which is defend America, especially at the core. And with that, I didn't know anything else. I mean, none of us knew anything else at that point in time. We just responded. We just said, from what we know, from our own expertise, this cannot happen in the way they are explaining it.
And I respect people that were saying the truth right on the day it happened. Now, I bought the PSYOP on the day it happened, and it's funny, I tell this story to a lot of people. I actually got an email from a friend from overseas, and it was one of these things that had been forwarded through 500 people before it got to me, but and I don't even really remember the content because I didn't read the whole thing. I just kind of politely deleted it. But it was somebody saying the fall of the buildings, the way this looked, it had to be some kind of bombs in the buildings that brought it down, and my brain just kind of, scanned it over, or my eyes scanned it over, and my brain told me, oh, here we go with this stuff again, and I deleted it. And, there was, saying, just from my experience as a regular guy out there in the street, is that that anybody who would even have suggested that there was any government complicity or that there was anything off about this story whatsoever, other than what we were told right in those days, essentially would have had their head bitten off in one way or another. I remember people, they talk about how everybody needs to remember how they were on 9/12. Well, from what I remember, a lot of people were very bloodthirsty on 9/12. I was listening to the radio, and it almost sounded like the regular programming was just ended, and that some crazy person had broken into the radio station, was throwing out some kind of psychopathic manifesto about all the countries we need to attack now, and how we need to turn the Middle East into a parking lot, all of that angry rhetoric that we were hearing. And so again, I just want to say that I respect people like yourself that were not afraid to speak the truth right on the day it happened, and that it's because of people like you that people like me were able to get the info and wake up.
Yeah, that's true. But rather than give me much credit for the day of. I had some preparation. The helicopter pilot, I'd worked on the West Coast, and I remember doing a documentary, or being the pilot to fly a documentary crew, a CBC crew, to the West Coast, to the Estevan Light. And I can't remember the producer's name at the moment, but we spent 3 days together photographing around the Estevan Light, and he was producing a documentary about World War II and about how Canadians were being prepared for the entry. Americans too prepared for the entry. It was January 1942, and in the darkness, or in the coming darkness, right at dusk, etc., the Estevan Light was shelled. Okay, and of course the big story the next day was that Japanese submarines are on the West Coast, and they are shelling the lighthouses, and they are threatening our coasts, etc. And the government of Canada needed that sort of impetus to deal with the conscription and to deal with putting people in the military, etc. It turns out, according to this producer, and I don't have independent verification, but it was an American destroyer shelling in order to create this news story. Well, let me say, this is something, of course, that I was learning, and I said, false flags. Well, it just adds up to my Canadian history experience, the number of times in which politicians have organized events in order to produce an effect, and that program was never aired. That program never made it to an airing, and that producer, of course, never kept his job. So It was, with those kind of things as the background, when you see major events that are televised, you've got to say to yourself, are we, is this the show for the day, etc.? And are we going to see immediate effects? And of course, the immediate effects that come down, the Patriot Act and the wars, as you say, that have started, and all the excuses and the instant vilification of Al-Qaeda and the Muslim world, it's too quick. You don't make those decisions, etc., without time spent and soul searching. But everybody had answers within 2 hours. So, you say to yourself that their quick speaking condemns them. And it was really quite, it's just that history is made. It's a game that they can control and play. And now that they own the media, etc., we can be manipulated. And that's why it's such a delight to be involved and to know that there's a whole area with the internet of alternate media that can dig to these things and find out what really is the truth. And then we can start moving on it.
Now, off the heels of what you just said about the alternative media, you were on the line listening to me talk about what happened with Facebook and all these alternative media people, including Richard Gage, who is more of an activist. But talk about this. What do you think is going on here with this Facebook thing, and what do you think this indicates, or could this lead to more mass censorship in the future, in your opinion?
Well, if you mentioned a number of alternate media people that have been taken, that their pages have been taken off Facebook. It does seem as if it's not some sort of bureaucratic or technical exception that has taken place. If they have targeted media, etc., then you're very, very, very correct that the Facebook usually allows people to share their sandwich menu and what they're thinking about tomorrow. It turns me off in many ways, because I don't think people are interested to that level in what I ate yesterday, okay, and how it stayed down. It's ridiculous. So to see a Facebook page being used for real information, first of all, the average person using Facebook finds it, well, it's a shock to the system. They like to go there and deal with things that are of no special account. They're just pastimes. So I think you're right. I think that if there's so many people being targeted at the same time, and they're all involved in alternate media trying to awaken the public to the issues of the day, it leads us to think that, hey, the areas of censorship are increasing. And of course, that the alternate media, YouTube and wherever else we can broadcast and produce an alternate perspective are are maintained. And if Facebook is being eliminated, we have to be able to say that. Those of us who aren't targeted, right, have to say we support Richard Gage. Why did you take him off?
Exactly, and you're taking the words right out of my mouth. It's funny, you see the media and you see entities like Facebook give this lip service to people communicating and how we're becoming a smaller world, but they're also afraid of it. They don't, like I said, they don't want us talking about Building 7 or any of these issues that are considered taboo by the media. And it's not just about Facebook. It's about, other networks too who censor 9/11 Truth or who attack it. It's about news reporters like James Ang over at NBC. When this 9/11 Truth group in Missouri adopted a stretch of highway, if you read the article, they're equating 9/11 Truth with KKK and neo-Nazis, and they're trying to put that in people's minds. They are afraid of this issue, and it's because it's so obvious. And I know I'm not going to speculate too much about the motivations or the thoughts of the people who actually perpetrated the crime, but you bring down Building 7 in the middle of New York City, and it looks so obvious. Just looking at it as an obvious controlled demolition. Then you have all the scientific facts presented by Richard Gage and David Chandler and all the like at AE 9/11 Truth and other organizations, and it becomes painfully obvious. And now they're stuck having to protect this massive lie, and it's crumbling down around them, so they are getting desperate. And and something I say it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. I'm going to ask for your take on my take here in a minute, but I say it's a good thing because we're making them afraid. But what you also have to be careful of too is when you trap something in a corner, it gets vicious. Just like you take a dog, if you chase it into a corner, it has nowhere else to go. It's going to do something even more vicious, or do something vicious to you to get out of that corner. And there is a fear in me and a danger, in my opinion, that we push the system into a corner that something more vicious could be done by them in order to get out of that corner. What do you think?
Well, I agree. I think if you push a dog into a corner, you got to get a fence and put around him, okay, so that you can deal with them in slow and measured degrees. You don't go in there with bare hands or even with the gloves, etc. You take time, let them cool down. I don't know how that analogy washes in the long term here, but what I see is that even in the alternate media, there's efforts to discredit ridiculous stories that are unfounded. There are efforts to try and deal. We have to concentrate on the fences. We got to build the fences which are factual. We don't have to venture into the areas of speculation. We must concentrate on the fences, and then eventually we've got to move to stage 2 and draw some conclusions. The public generally follow leadership, and leadership, of course, has been the government leadership and the media leadership have been used to shaping public opinion. Well, we've got to shape public opinion too, and not in a clandestine method, but in a factual method. We've got to present enough facts, but then we have to be able to arrive at an opinion that brings many who haven't spent the time or could not spend the time into some confidence that they can draw conclusions and that there should be closure in some form worldwide. We watched a conference here 2 or 3 weeks ago in Kuala Lumpur where world Muslim leaders and many from the Western world, Richard Gage attended and many others, were concerned that somehow the world has to come to closure. There's just too much destruction still coming out of 9/11, and the war on terror is affecting everything that we do. A new generation is learning those terms, and if it's a false a flag that's being held up, there's a war on terror. Somehow we have to destroy that flag, and the only way to do that is to deal with the original cause and produce the facts that categorically take away the power of their motivation to wage war on boogeymen terrorists that don't exist.
You're absolutely right, and in the intro to this, I described our society here as a neurotic society, and I see it. I see it just by watching the news at night. But we're neurotic simply because what I see as the beginning of the neurosis was the cover up of this tremendous lie. When normal, regular folks, just nice folks, goes on a TV show with scientific evidence, no speculation, just testing a hypothesis, it gets jumped on, gets shouted down. Okay, people learn to respond. And I've seen this with the 9/11 truth community too. Is just you learn to respond with the same thing, and this is dribbled out and flooded out into all other areas of political conversation. To now you've got a very divided society here in the United States, at each other's throats, and a lot of this is based, like we've said already, on this lie at the very start of it, because the War of Terror was the first rock thrown into this pond of America that created all of these waves. And what this has done, and I've talked about this before, to personal relationships, interpersonal relationships, what it's done to people's lives, because they've created this wedge that didn't exist before. And as the story melts away and as the lie mumbles, people are either waking up and seeing the truth, or they're becoming more neurotic in themselves, trying to defend the lie, because but with less ammunition to do it. And that's going to have an effect on them, and it's going to have an effect on society as well.
The concern I have is the fact that people are learning to live with the TSA. They're learning to accept the intrusions. They're learning to accept the attacks on their personal liberties, and it's relentless. It keeps coming at us, etc. You can't do this. You can't mail this. You can't. You must have these banking regulations. You must just every area of life. You can't carry this on an airplane. You enter an airport now, and you enter a different world. And these things are having such an effect that we have to call to remembrance. This is how this got started. The liberties that you enjoy on the street should not be totally compromised the moment you walk into a public airport. You are not a criminal. You do not deserve to be treated like a potential criminal. You're no different than when you got out of the taxi. So, the whole thing is that there's a conditioning going on. They're relentlessly promoting this, and of course, we're fighting to deal with it. But my concern is that long term, they have tremendous resources to condition the public to accept less and less and less. And of course, we have to really be disciplined to produce evidence and then not let people get away from the conclusions. And of course, I think Architects and Engineers for 911 Truth has the best set of tools. The airplanes are gone, okay? The pictures that exist, etc. But the fact is, controlled demolitions will take place in the United States this week. You can go watch one, okay? And then you can go and watch the films, etc., that deal with Building 7 and compare for yourself. You just can't get a building to fall into its own footprint just by accident. It requires months of planning and preparation and knowledge of the whole structure. So I think that just has to be trumpeted. It just has to come to the forefront. But how to move it from evidence after evidence after evidence into the realm of fact after fact. Let's do something. Let's empower the people of the world who are now interested, because the whole world is affected. Empower the people of the world to go after the perpetrators, who aren't those 19 guys. Okay, there's somebody far more powerful involved in this, because this is just the most sophisticated operation broadcast on television. Okay, then we just can't give that way to 19 guys who never learned to fly airplanes or were just used as pawns.
just to touch on some points you made. You were talking about as people get conditioned to accept certain things in society that they would have never tolerated before. When I served in the Peace Corps in Uzbekistan back in 2005, I noticed that in that society is that when people when they have to deal with some tyrannical thing, whether it be cops pulling taxi drivers over to basically rob them on the side of the road, they're doing it with a smile on their face, and it's a big joke. When people talk about, not being able to pass some kind of checkpoint or something, they'll joke about slipping them a few dollars. It's like a joke to them, and then they go and drink later. And when people start making a joke of it, when people start accepting that their government is lying to them and that this is the way it is, then that's when the iron fist clenches and the people are thoroughly conquered. We can't let that happen here in America, and that's part of why I do this show. Why we focus on 9/11, on 9/11 science. We are the voice in the head. That's why we're trying to be the voice in the head of the perpetrators, but in the head of America that can't be denied. The subconscious thought that it keeps on coming back and nagging them until they crack and they scream the truth.
I've often wondered why they did it so publicly, because a lot of stuff that in the past has been false flags has been done quite privately in some venue that would be more persuasive. But to do it on a Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock and rush hour traffic, obviously they wanted an impact that was so high. And of course, there's risks associated with that because they didn't figure on people drawing conclusions. They wanted the whole emotional baggage to stampede America into. And unfortunately, many people who are struggling with their loyalties to their country and to the society in which they live, etc., are unwilling to face that there is an elephant in the room. There's a criminal, perhaps much more sinister and much more well-equipped than the burglar that might face you in the alleyway, unfortunately. And that's untenable because they've spent their whole lives respecting such power, always giving credit, giving license, etc., allowing the benefit of the doubt, etc. I mean, gripe we do about politicians, but down deep, there's a fundamental respect for authority. We're taught that right from the scriptures. Romans 13 has it point blank. But the fact is, there comes a time where we have to add things up, and we have to say to ourselves, who could do this? Who is possible who could pull this off, etc. And when that happens, if you retreat into your defenses about my home and native land, forget it. You're not helping your kids, your grandkids, and you're certainly not building your nation.
Well, it's funny because I can present the science truth and I can convince people, but what always holds them up is they think, man, somebody would have to be really evil to do something like that. And they run it through the filter of their own brains and they say, well, I wouldn't do something like that. Why would somebody else do that? And my personal opinion, just with dealing with regular folks on the street, is that is the biggest obstacle, is that people can't conceive of something so bad that somebody, obviously with controlled demolition evidence being, so apparent because of the work of so many scientists that we talk about every week on this show. Obviously, if there was a controlled demolition and the people were inside, whoever did it decided to bring down those buildings with those lives inside them. And yeah, that is pure evil. I'm not afraid to say it. That is evil. And people, that's the biggest sticking point, is they just can't conceive of anyone being that bad.
Yeah, that's true. That's exactly the issue. And we live, unfortunately, just because there's powers above us, we have to come to the conclusion that all men are tainted with evil, and wherever their motivations are. And we got to remember also that there's a bid out there for world leadership and bringing everyone into line. These are prophetic times. These are times in which we have to struggle with very, very powerful concepts in which the only thing left for for the elite of the world is to control it and to control who does what and how they respond, and they're using these events and these tools to either beat us into a corner so that we're totally ineffectual and paralyzed, and perhaps to identify those that are fighters and those that want to hold on to the ideals of truth and justice. I mean, we're built with that into us. That's our moral code. It's something that's God-given. It's part of us, and we don't give it up for slavery easily. And thank God for that, because that's what's driving people like Richard Gage to put his life on the line to make this story known.
Speaking of fighters and the people out there doing something and fighting back against this tremendous lie, this is an issue that I want to bring up more on this show and to the audience. You know, keep your ears peeled for this topic to show up on this show more often, is that the one of activist burnout. You know, how do you keep yourself coming back, you know, day after day, week after week to this issue? You know, because the evidence speaks for itself. How many times can you talk about free fall acceleration without steam coming out of your ears? And I see this as a big problem, and I don't see enough resources for truth activists to turn to help them with this. Now, you have a spiritual background, so I'd like your opinion on this topic and your advice, if you have any. What would you tell activists on how to combat, you know, activist burnout and keep this issue going in their own hearts?
Well, I believe that everyone will give an account. Your Creator will require an account of you for your life, for your actions, those deeds that you've done. And when you're presented with the opportunity to do good or to do evil, you have choices. And here we have, we're insignificant as individuals, but the fact is we were ringside. We had ringside seats to evidence, which is now coming together in our hearts and minds so that we draw conclusions. And it's like watching a crime on the street and then walking by and not going to the or not offering to be a witness because somebody's been badly hurt by criminals. I mean, we're watching this in a mega scale. So all I'm saying is that your conscience, your responsibility as a human being responsible to your Creator is to go with your gut. If truth is important, if you can live as a slave, if you can live a life that's a deception, or participate for to remain quiet is to be a part of the deception. So if you get a chance to speak about these issues and you deny it, then you're hurting yourself. I think that in many respects you have to have somewhat of you have to have a sacrificial point of view, because there's in many cases in history there's been deathbed confessions. I mean, Woodrow Wilson gave up the power of sovereign money supply to the Federal Reserve in 1913. Years later, on his deathbed, he regretted it. And he says, I gave too much power to these people. I cooperated with them. I was their pawn. That's too late, Woodrow. Okay? You're going to face your Creator, so don't tell us. So those are the things that you want to avoid. You want to go to your rest, etc., having done what you could do to promote what you know is right.
Well, it's funny, too. You know, the way I see it is that the system has, you know, we were talking about putting a dog, you know, chasing a dog into the corner. Well, the system has chased society into such a corner that you either are one of these people we talked about before who just kind of looks the other way, maybe even acknowledge the truth but doesn't want to think about it, or you're one of these people who are, you know, screaming until you're blue in the face because you want justice, but also because you want to put this issue behind you and basically move on with your life. So it creates this paradigm that, you know, that exists and is hard to get out of. No, what I think part of the solution could be is just for people to get together, to, you know, for more people on shows like this one and other shows to come together on message boards and to create a network. And we've done that to an extent, but those networks need to be strengthened. And so that's basically talking with each other and forming our own community that is that the lie can't touch. That's the way that I see it.
Yeah, that's true. The only difficulty, of course, is that the community that we join is for every one of us who is willing to come on a radio show and speak about these things, and there are 100 who say, I believe that, but I won't expose myself publicly. Unfortunately, we've got to overcome that, and we've got to move to a point where those that think and are prepared to sacrifice for a truth-filled world, or what they conceive to be a truth-filled world, are prepared to pay for it, which means to be public, to take the scorn if that's what's necessary. Because I know what I was like on. I certainly received a load of scorn for my position on the first day of 9/11, but I just blurted it out. This has to be an inside job. My airmanship tells me, okay, and I think people can take their time, but eventually they have to look at what architects and engineers for 911 Truth have said about the physical properties of huge buildings and set up and how they're brought, and they have to say, look, someone pushed a button to bring this building down, and 1,000 lives went with it. They chose to, and then they chose to tell a big lie afterwards and to try and cover it up. Dispense with all the steel, sweep up all the dust, keep everybody out, silence those who had direct knowledge. I find those are events that are factual. People have come forward and have made those statements based on their expertise. So it's everyone. There's no one in America, no one in the world who is a thinking person has any excuse for ignoring the factual evidence that's being produced. And I guess our goals in the future should be just to make sure the facts speak, and that the conjecture is left, but that the facts draw us to source, and that source has to be accountable to the people of the world.
Yeah, I heard a quote once, and I forgot who said it, but they said something like, if good people were as organized as the mafia, then we would have no problems. And part of getting organized on this issue is not being afraid, being unapologetic, and saying things like, in your Facebook, I support Richard Gage, right in your avatar. And something I always hear from family and friends, either jokingly or, serious, saying, they're going to put you on a list, this unseen list floating around somewhere that I'm going to be on this list. And what my answer to that is, good, put me on your list. Put me on 1,000 lists. I take that as a badge of honor. Yeah. All right, I'm disappointed that they didn't target my Facebook, that I can't join that list of great people that were censored. Okay, put me on the list and take off my Facebook too. I'm begging you to do. And that's the attitude that we need to have as a community and as a nation, because we are not timid people here in the United States and in Canada too, where you are. We didn't build these countries being timid people. We built them being strong people, rugged people, unafraid to tell the truth when we see it, and to speak for ourselves and to speak our minds. And that's what we need to come back to.
Absolutely.
Now, Phil, over there in Canada, what is the general sentiment about this issue? It's a different country. It happened here in the United States, but just from your own observations, obviously you can't speak for every Canadian, but what do you think the general sentiment in Canada is?
I think it's identical to perhaps it's a little more perceptive. But I'm living here in Costa Rica, and I've been here for 12 years, and yet I'm talking with Canadians all the time. But the majority, more and more people are coming to the awareness that you can't have multiple wars and multiple changes in our society, and we're affected by that, by the way, too. Constant changes and restrictions, etc., and reduction of civil liberties. You can't have all these happenings take place coincidentally. There has to be reasons, and so deductively, more and more Canadians are drawing those conclusions. So the hundreds are starting to grow, and of course, out of those, there will be percentages of people that will speak. Not, but there's very, very strong parallels between the Americans and Canadians on these issues. Don't forget, we have media which are well and truly the servants of the state as well, and they're reluctant to do anything but support the establishment's point of view. And so alternate media is something you have to jog people's minds. I find that's a great introduction. What's your alternate media? And when people come back and say, well, mine's Fox News, I say, well, wrong. You've got to be a little deeper than that, a little more perceptive. You have to look at the strings and the money behind these. So people are beginning to learn that there's perspectives which are serving the establishment, and there's perspectives which are truthful and perhaps will cost us. I hope that's the future for Canada.
You know, Phil, I find it really funny that when Fox News refers to other networks as the mainstream media, as if they're on the outside of that somehow. They actually do that. I just can't help but just laugh in front of that flickery blue box when I see them do that. Phil, we are actually out of time, and this hour has passed very fast. I love talking to you. We got to have you back on the show. Thanks for coming on 9/11 Freefall.
Okay, you're welcome.
Now, folks, remember, you can listen to this program every week on Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern. For Bernie Suarez, this is Andrew Steele saying thank you for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week.
11 years after 9/11, experts are speaking out about what really destroyed the Twin Towers and Building 7.
They're talking about a single columnar collapse or failure that resulted in a total collapse of the building.
Building number 7 descended in free fall for the first 100 feet, which means that there was absolutely no resistance to the descent whatsoever.
So all of the columns really needed to be severed at the same time.
The symmetry is the smoking gun.
NIST has admitted it went into free fall for 8 stories.
You don't need to be an engineer or an architect to see what happened to those buildings.
Dit is controlled demolition. Zeker weten.
What I saw, it was a classic implosion. The center of the core, the penthouse area, starts to move first, and then the building follows along with it.
NIST excluded the document from FEMA in Appendix C that documented the evidence of melting steel.
More than 1,500 architects and engineers and 12,000 others, including many scientists, have signed the petition calling for a scientific investigation of the destruction of the Twin Towers and World Trade Center Building 7. The report, issued by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, referred to as NIST, was not valid science.
Go to 911expertspeakout.org.